Hi guys, Jackie from Famished Farm, and we are back with another recipe stash pantry challenge thingamajig. We are making new recipes that are more geared for this week and hopefully the coming weeks, more geared to healthy eating. I have diabetes, my husband has a heart condition, so we are we've always tried to eat clean. Whatever that means to you, it means not the same to me, but it just means we're aware of what we put in our bodies. We want that to be fuel to get us through these next decades that we hopefully will be around. So this week in the pantry stash, it was more of an email that came out from foodnetwork.com. Sorry if you can hear that. There's mowing going on out there. Foodnetwork.com sent an email, 25 healthy dinners. And in that list, I actually found 3 recipes that I want to try. And why these recipes? It was things that we like to eat and things we want to eat. We want to have more fish in our diet. And we both enjoy ground turkey and chicken. So that is, the new recipes are a sheet pan chicken fajita, healthy air fryer turkey meatballs with zoodles, and a Whole30 shrimp and cauliflower grits recipe. And to round that out, we're taking a casserole out of the freezer that we're going to have breakfast for dinner. I'm going to make enchiladas with just a favorite Weight Watcher recipe from years ago. I've got meatless still in the freezer that I can do that on Monday, and Rod will be cooking burgers. Now, we are going out of town for the Carbondale, Illinois eclipse, and I know it's going to be across the country, but one of the areas with the best period of totality is Carbondale, Illinois. I'm from Illinois. I went to school at Southern Illinois University, and my best friend lives there with her family. So we get to go spend a couple days up there for the eclipse and whatever other trouble we can get into. And so some of these are things that we will take with us with a little grill and just do on the fly. Other things we'll be cooking coming up. And you may see me in different clothes as I just cook each night's meal. But at the end of this video, if you stay tuned, you'll get the recap on the thumbs up and what changes I made to the recipes. And in the comments, if you guys do you have a favorite healthy recipe that is kind of on your weekly or monthly rotation, just something that you and your family enjoys? Let me know what it is, a link to the website, or just, where I can find it if I search. That would be much appreciated. So let's get to the cooking. Hang on. And first up, we have our sheet pan chicken fajitas from foodnetwork.com. And we are making a little switch here. The recipe calls for 1 pound of baby bell peppers, which would number 12 to 15 peppers. I don't have baby bells, but I do have access to nice green bell peppers. I will say the finished recipe is much prettier if you have yellow, orange, green, and red peppers in it. But the taste is still very good with just these green peppers. And I don't have them. It's mainly a cost thing. I just choose, I'd rather pay 78 cents a piece for these green peppers. So all the recipe says to do is to half them, stem them, and then seed them. So that's what I'm doing here. You can see I've also got a lime cut up and ready to go for, I'm just going to end up packaging that with the cheese that I shred later. So I just don't forget to serve it with the fajitas. So what I'm going to do is just cut these then in pieces that kind of would be similar to either what you would get at the restaurant or, a baby bell pepper. And then I'm going to put some foil on the pan, and it does call for that. If you have, it didn't really stick, so it's not necessary, but it does make cleanup a little bit easier. Even though when I was flipping things, I did kind of poke through the foil, but it wasn't a hugely messy dinner. But I kind of put these out so skin side is down, and then we're going to make the seasoning that will go on the vegetables and the chicken. And many people suggested in the reviews, and there were over 400 five-star reviews on this recipe, so it was really good. But they suggested instead of using the chili powder, salt, and pepper to add additional spices. So this is just my homemade taco seasoning, and I do, like the recipe called for, a tablespoon of that. And then here I'm going to thinly slice some onions, and then we'll get those on the sheet pan along with the peppers, and I do kind of separate them. Oh, and I meant to say skin side up on those peppers, and I just thought you could see the charring better probably if they were skin side up, but I do end up flipping them around a bit. The recipe did call for a large yellow onion. I just used what I had. And then it does call for spreading a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil over, and then using half of your seasoning mix. So this is roughly a half a tablespoon of taco seasoning on top. And then pop that into your oven. And this has been preheated on a high setting, your broiler setting. And I did put it on the top, and we'll get that charring. And the chicken breast, I had to thaw it that morning. Of course, I forgot to take it out, so part of it is slightly cooked. But I'm just going to thinly slice, say, 1/4 inch, and separate that into, nice sized chunks. And these are those humongous Walmart breasts, so it is kind of thick, but I figured if it was a 1/4 inch slice, it would be just fine. And the peppers, that was at the 5-minute mark. I just pulled it out to make sure it was okay. And here we are, just about done with the chicken. And we're just going to throw that back in the bag that I took it out of the freezer. And then we'll add in the remaining tablespoon of olive oil and the rest of the seasoning. And as I'm mixing the seasoning, smushing the bag to distribute the seasoning, which the recipe actually suggests you do that in a bowl, I would say that it would probably mix more thoroughly and evenly if you did it in a bowl, but I just didn't want to dirty another bowl. But I did add another half a tablespoon of the seasoning, and I will say that it was pretty good the way we had it. If you really like spicy, you might even want to add more, but 1.5 tablespoons of the chili powder did it for us. So 10 minutes on the peppers was fine, and about this time, as I'm finishing smushing, the peppers are coming out of the oven. So then all you do is simply layer the chicken on top of the peppers and onions. And here I've kind of evenly placed them. And while that goes in the oven, again, broil, it says about 10 minutes. While I'm doing letting the oven do the broiling, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to prepare some shredded Monterey Jack cheese, just so it's ready for us the night that we do decide to eat this. And I do put that little dish of lime in there too, just to keep it together for dinner. And here's how it came out of the oven. And I think we did cook it a bit longer than the 10 minutes it called for, but not much. And on a flour tortilla, this was great. Add the cheddar. It recommends guacamole, hot sauce, salsa, or sour cream also. It was very. Here we're starting with the breadcrumbs for our healthy air fryer turkey meatballs with zoodles, zucchini noodles. We're doubling this, so 2/3 cup of breadcrumbs and a 1/2 cup of milk. We'll mix that up and then let it sit and hydrate, although I don't think that was really necessary for the recipe. While that's doing that, we'll spiralize our zucchini, and that's just my little spiralizer there. Cut off the ends and get to it. It took about several minutes to get that done. When I'm using this thing, I can only get down to about, I don't know, an inch and a half from the end. And so what I do, and I'll show that in a little bit, is I just kind of julienne the remaining chunk of zucchini. If you wanted, throw it in the freezer for vegetable stock, put it on a salad at lunchtime. I just choose to use the whole thing for the recipe. And this did call for 1.5 pounds of zoodles, or about 3 medium zucchinis. And then once you're all done spiralizing, then add a pinch or so of salt, and that just is to help release extra fluid. And I'm going to end up just eventually wrapping this in saran and putting it in the fridge with the lime. Then we're going to pull out the ground turkey, and here's our bowl with the milk and breadcrumbs. I would fluff that up with a fork or something before you try to do the mixing of the ground turkey and the rest of the ingredients with this, because it really got pretty solid and it was hard to mix into the ground turkey. Absolutely no issue with the finished product, but it just took longer than it should have. So we're going to add, that is not ricotta cheese as the recipe calls for, but we doubled that to, it's cottage cheese. I use that for ricotta a lot. That's a 1/2 cup. And then it calls for fresh parsley. I'm just going to use my dried, and 2 tablespoons of finely grated Parmesan, which I do pull out my block of Parmesan and get that in. Oh, and this is the oregano, and I'm using a teaspoon because, again, I'm doubling this recipe. Go ahead and salt and pepper. And here's my Parmesan, and it suggests splitting this Parmesan, so you are actually adding more grated Parmesan to the finished product. So I do grate up enough to use for later and just put that in this little bowl, which I do put in with the zoodles. Oh, that wasn't lime. That was the Parmesan cheese that goes in with that. Here we are mixing, and again, just kind of a pain. I do eventually opt to get rid of my rings and just use my hands. I'm going to spare you the filming of that part of it. I messed up, I guess. And we're going to go right to the preparing of the meatballs. They say 1.5 tablespoons, about 1 inch across. I just used my big ice cream scoop and filled it roughly 1/4 to 1/3 full, and then placed them on my little Teflon sheets for my air fryer trays. And I ended up getting probably 20 or so meatballs of the size I'm about to show you here. Now, it's a good idea before you start this, to go ahead and pull out your air fryer and let it preheat to 400 degrees. I, of course, forget to do that, and after these are all divvied out, I do pull that out and get it warming up, but that was a mistake on my part to forget that. You could do this just with spoons. You don't have to be, some people would re-roll those. I'm okay with weird shaped meatballs. Plus, I don't have the patience to roll them. So one of the substitutions I made was, instead of using 1 1/4 cups of just plain tomato sauce as the sauce for these meatballs, I used a jar of my home canned tomato, or rather pizza sauce. And because it is, it's cherry tomatoes and you've got the little skins in it, I decide to blend it, and it's pretty watery. So I'm going to blend this with a tablespoon or two of tomato powder and thicken that up a little bit. And this, I think, was a really good call because it had real good flavor. And I was really happy with the final result. So as we're finishing the blending of the tomato sauce, the air fryer is finally preheated and ready to go. So we'll move over to that side of the counter and we'll put these 3 trays. Now this is a big air fryer, but it's not my favorite appliance. There are 3 trays, and the problem is the tray on the bottom barely cooks, the middle barely cooks, and then the top cooks. So we're going to end up what they say will be a 10-minute cooking job. Turning once in the midway of the cooking time ends up being about 25 minutes. So this appliance does not save me any time, and I would much rather have thrown these on a cookie sheet into the oven. But here we are. So your mileage is going to vary. If you have number one, if you made a single recipe, it's probably going to fit in 1 tray of your air fryer. But be that as it may, here I am preparing the pizza / tomato sauce into the container that I'm going to put these in the fridge. I'm going to actually save these for dinner tomorrow night, but we'll put these in the fridge in the tomato sauce so they're ready just to be warmed up in either the microwave or the oven. And I just did a little plate of this and warmed them up in the microwave, and these were delicious with the zoodles. Yummy. And our last recipe from foodnetwork.com is the Whole30 shrimp and cauliflower grits. Now I had big expectations for this because one of my favorite dishes, I did an art show in Pensacola and they had the shrimp and grits vendor there. And if you've not had it, I hate grits, but it was the most delicious thing I've ever tried. So this particular recipe, I'll give you a hint, it's not it. But I did make some substitutions, and it was, I'm sure, my mistake. So I start with a bag of cauliflower rice, and I've taken some milk out of the freezer along with just a little bit of milk I had, maybe a half a cup from the refrigerator. So I'm putting this on the stove with the lid on to get the milk, the frozen milk, to thaw. And I am going to stir this a couple times. I'm not going to start the cooking time until this milk is thawed because it is frozen. The recipe called for unsweetened almond milk, but several of the people in the comments said that they just used dairy milk or whatever milk is your milk of choice. So I have added a little olive oil, salt, pepper, and then the 1/3 of a cup of nutritional yeast. And something was wrong at this point. And there was a smell that I did not like. I tasted this and it tasted fine, but my nose couldn't get over the smell. So I don't know, does nutritional yeast go bad? You know, I've used it, I've cooked with it steady since the beginning of the year and with no problem. So I'm just not sure. Maybe it didn't like my frozen cauliflower rice. There was no smell from the cauliflower rice when I put it on, so I'm not sure what happened. Anyway, we clean out the wok, splash some olive oil in it, and then instead of the collard greens, the 4 cups of shredded collard greens, I had a bag of frozen kale in my freezer, And so that's what we're going to basically wilt, and it should only take a couple minutes if you're using fresh. With frozen, it took about 4 minutes, and we are just gonna come over here and stir the pan every once in a while. And I'm not sure if I showed the salt and pepper that went on this, but we did season it. I would highly recommend throwing some vinegar on it or something else for a little more flavor. Some balsamic would be great. Once we get that in a bowl, we're going to clean the pan again and then start with our shrimp. Now, I've put some covers on both these dishes that I have the cauliflower rice and the greens in, so it's staying warm. And then we're going to finish this with 2 tablespoons of oil over medium-high heat. And we're going to add our thawed shrimp, and I'm just using a 12-ounce bag of frozen shrimp that I've thawed. And then we're going to add some garlic and some cayenne pepper. And I think the recipe calls for minced cloves, but I just used my dry garlic. A little sprinkle of cayenne. These shrimp were really good, so this part of the recipe was a winner. We did eat the shrimp. And remember, this only takes a few minutes to cook the shrimp through. You're cooking them until they're opaque. They'll lose that translucence in the tails. And I pull it off the heat then, and we're going to finish this with a squeeze of lemon. I use a half a lemon. And then there's enough residual oil in the pan that this is going to make a nice sauce for them. And then I just sprinkle some of my homegrown parsley on top. And it did call for a tablespoon of water. I didn't see that. It wasn't really needed. The shrimp were still saucy enough as is. This sheet pan chicken fajita was super easy and super flavorful, and boy, am I looking forward to it. We are planning to use this when we get home from our long weekend, and it will be in the freezer, ready to go. So what did I change on the recipe? I did add an extra half a tablespoon of my taco seasoning instead of the chili powder and salt and pepper, as the recipe stated. I used regular green bell peppers instead of the baby bell peppers, and only part of the onion. And then everything else was pretty much as the recipe called for. And again, they invite you to add Monterey Jack cheese, guac, hot sauce, salsa, sour cream. And we will be adding some of that. It was very good. And our next recipe was healthy air fryer turkey meatballs with zoodles. And this was, again, another very delicious foodnetwork.com recipe. I did my own spiralizing, and I doubled the meatball mixture. So I used a pound and a quarter actually of ground turkey, so a little more than double. Used cottage cheese instead of the ricotta, and instead of plain tomato sauce, I used my home canned pizza sauce. I just realized this picture was before the tomato sauce was ladled over it, and don't forget that because it adds a lot of flavor, especially to the noodles, the zoodles rather, which are just lightly salted. This was also very good. And the last recipe, the Whole30 shrimp and cauliflower grits. Eat the shrimp, forget the rest. We won't be making this one again.